Hello, David Ansara here of the Center for Risk Analysis. We help you to identify political and economic risk in the current environment. And as you know, the economic lockdown has persisted for many months now in South Africa, and there are calls to lift the lockdown in its entirety. I'm joined today by Piet Le Roux, who's the CEO of specialises, but also the coordinator of Business for Ending Lockdown, which is a group of business organizations and other interested parties that is advocating for the complete withdrawal of the state of disaster and the ending of all lockdown protocols. Piet, welcome to the Center for Risk Analysis channel.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to join you.
So Piet, why is it that Business for Ending Lockdown is advocating for the complete removal of the lockdown protocols?
Lockdown is the single most harmful thing in South Africa right now. It is harmful to life, to livelihoods. It is causing us massive risk in terms of political instability, social instability, things like hunger. And then, of course, the depletion of savings people are trying to make by during very tough economic times caused by lockdown, not by a virus. And it's been apparent that lockdown is the greatest risk in South Africa for quite a while compared to COVID-19. Initially, you might remember that we were told as the public and as businesses by government and its advisors that the country faces upward of 350,000 deaths, possibly from COVID-19. That has not happened. And in fact, it has been clear for many months now that that was a complete over-exaggeration based on bad science and a bad understanding of numbers, etc., by politicians. And so where we are today is around 15,000 deaths, which is nothing special in a country where 500,000 people die every year. But it is something very special when we consider that lockdown has caused many millions of jobs possibly to be lost. It has caused a complete collapse in GDP growth. In fact, we're steep into negative territory when we were already there. We were a country that couldn't afford lockdown, yet government persisted. And now, since this is by far the largest risk in the country to everything, from personal health to social and political stability, that is why we say end lockdown now, not level 1, not level anything. Just end it. It was a mistake. Honest mistakes do happen. Some of it were irresponsible, some of it was bona fide, but it is time to end lockdown.
So Piet, what alternatives would you suggest that individuals, firms, families take to protect themselves from COVID-19? It seems that, as you suggested, that the case fatality rate has been a lot lower than initially anticipated around the world, but particularly in South Africa. So I think in one of your statements, I saw you making a suggestion around that people should take their own initiatives. What would that look like?
Yes, I think that we represent, as the Business for Ending Lockdown campaign, now more than 50,000 businesses. And we, unlike government and unlike supposedly, I suppose, people who call themselves scientists who want to prescribe to every person in the country, every business, every province, every town, exactly how they should react to COVID-19 in a uniform manner, we're saying, well, look, we understand the risks now. It's perfectly clear as it can be, what your chances are of contracting it compared to other diseases and what you can and cannot do. I mean, the whole world's studying it. What to do about lockdown. So we're saying convert these compulsory size one-fits-all regulations, change them, make them voluntary, and let people, depending on their circumstances, their age risk, their age group, their industry, their population density, the nature of their business, the nature of their family risk, etc. Let people coordinate this for themselves. So we're saying convert all regulations into recommendations. And then, as we've seen, these recommendations, even by the World Health Organization and others with regard to masks or not, etc., they keep changing. So leave it up to people, to towns, to businesses to change and adapt to the risks as it is apparent to them and as it affects them with their own risk vectors.
Yes, and certainly as the Center for Risk Analysis, we are very much focused on risk and risk mitigation. But I think it's also important to understand that there are degrees of risk and that risk is undertaken by everyone all the time. And we are all making these kinds of risk calculations every day. When you get into your car to go to the shops, you're taking some degree of risk that you might be in an accident, but the benefits of the convenience of going to the shops outweighs it. All right. Well, Pete, what are the other steps or initiatives that you, as Business for Ending Lockdown, are taking? Are you considering exploring the legal route on this?
Yes, we have explored the legal route individually as different organizations. Collectively, we've explored different avenues. The problem with litigation, which Sakeliga, for example, has been successful with, and others have been too, is that it takes quite a while. And we're seeing the slow unwinding of lockdown, even though it's irrational to maintain it as it is. We're seeing government unwind it. There's this whole pretense of moving from level 2 to level 1 instead of just abolishing things as they stand, because there's no justification to continue. Nevertheless, there's an attempt to prolong lockdown. We're seeing an extension of the state of disaster beyond September 15 now to 15 October. We're against this, but the litigation takes at least a number of weeks to complete. And as we've seen, government does not litigate in good faith. They apply all sorts of delaying tactics, etc. And so at this point, we consider our primary purpose to be influencing the public sentiment against lockdown, explaining and putting pressure on government. We're also working together with groups like PANDA, or Pandemic Data Analysis, who have done stellar work in analyzing lockdown and have been very accurate for the past 3 months in their prediction of deaths and the death toll in the country. So we've had last week we presented what we call the definitive lockdown presentation, and we've already had just a few days, more than 50,000 views of that presentation across several platforms. And we've had praise from people like Professor Michael Levitt, an ex-Nobel Prize winner, and so on. So right now, we're using our energy and our collective resources to mobilize our members and public pressure against government, and we're keeping the litigation option open. It's important to completely lift the state of disaster. We'll see what the announcements are next week, and then, of course, we'll have to see what can be done.
All right, Pete. Well, we have actually had Panda on the CRA channel. We'll link to that in the description below, as well as to the presentation that you mentioned. But I think, just in closing, the bottom-up strategy that you're advocating, I think, has a lot of merit. And what hasn't been considered, I think, here is the costs, the hidden costs that are perhaps not immediately visible, but which will have a huge impact on people's lives and their livelihoods and their quality of life. So thank you very much, Piet, for sharing your insights with us, and we wish you well.
Thank you, David. I think it was Frédéric Bastiat, the French economist of the late 1850s or so, who said that there's only one difference between a good and a bad economist, and that's that the bad economist looks only at the first or immediate effect, and a good economist considers the unseen secondary and tertiary effects of a policy and a step and an action. And that's exactly what you've just called for. It's considering lockdown not in its first consequence, but in its unseen consequences. And unfortunately, we're going to be living with those for a number of years now.
Thanks, Pete. I agree. Yes, second order effects are very consequential, and it's often very difficult to determine how the consequences of your actions are going to unfold. That's it from me, David Ansara. Please do like this video and subscribe to the channel for more insights and analysis. And do follow the link in the description below for our 30-day free trial, where you can get access to all of our reports and briefings for free. Join us tomorrow, same time. Take care.